What would you do if someone tried to measure your worth with a single dollar? What if that dollar wasn't just small, but meant to humiliate you? On one of the coldest nights in Chicago, a man worth $40 million tried to send a message. He had no idea the message would come back to destroy him. This is the story of a tip so small, it shook an empire. At 4:30 a.m., the radiator in Chloe Bennett's one-bedroom apartment clanged and rattled like it was fighting for its last breath. The metal pipes groaned against the frozen Chicago air, a harsh, scraping rhythm that had long since replaced silence in her life. Sleep wasn't an option. It hadn't been for a while. Outside, the temperature hovered just above zero. Inside wasn't much warmer. Chloe stood beside the narrow bed and carefully pulled a thin wool blanket up to her 6-year-old daughter Lily's chin. Lily slept peacefully, her small fingers wrapped around her inhaler as if it were a stuffed animal. That inhaler wasn't just plastic and medicine. It was oxygen. It was safety. It was expensive. And that cost was climbing. Chloe stared at the cracked ceiling and did the math again. And again. The pharmacy had raised the price. Rent was due in 3 days. She was short $200. $200 might not sound like much to some people. To her, it was everything. Her shift at the Velvet Oak started in 6 hours. A steakhouse that wanted to look 5-star, even though it sat in a tired, 3-star neighborhood. She whispered to the peeling paint above her, almost embarrassed to say it out loud. Just one good table, please. Just one big spender. By 6 p.m., that prayer felt like it had drifted off into the frozen sky. The dining room was nearly empty. The polished wood floors gleamed under soft lighting, but there were more vacant tables than guests. The air smelled faintly of butter and overconfidence. Rick, the manager, paced near the bar. His cologne hit the air before his voice did, sharp, aggressive. Trying too hard. If we don't turn tables tonight, Bennett, I'm cutting shifts next week, he snapped, tugging at his too-tight tie. You were slow last Friday. Don't let it happen again. Chloe kept her voice steady. Calm. Professional. The kitchen was backed up. Excuses didn't matter. She couldn't lose this job. Not now. I'll make it happen, she said. And then the bell above the heavy oak door chimed. A blast of icy wind sliced through the room, and behind it walked a man who carried himself like he owned the cold. He was in his late 60s, silver hair combed sharply back, posture rigid. His charcoal cashmere overcoat looked like it cost more than Chloe's car. But it wasn't the coat that silenced the room. It was his eyes. Steel gray. Empty. Evaluating. He bypassed the hostess entirely and walked straight to booth 4, the best booth in Chloe's section, the one near the fireplace. Chloe adjusted her apron, inhaled slowly, and approached. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Velvet Oak. May I start you with sparkling water? He didn't look at her. Room temperature. No ice. Lime wedge on the side. Do not put it in the glass. The way he said it wasn't demanding. It was precise. Surgical. As if he were testing her before she'd even begun. Of course, she replied smoothly. And the ribeye. Rare. If it's medium rare, I'll send it back. If it's blue, I'll send it back. Rare. Do you understand the distinction? She didn't flinch. I understand perfectly. She didn't write it down. Difficult customers like to be impressed. She gave him nothing to criticize. For the next hour, he tested everything. The music was too loud, even though it was barely audible. The bread was uninspired. The water glass had a smudge that wasn't there. When the steak arrived, perfectly cooked, deep red center glistening under the lights, he sliced into it and inspected the middle for a full minute. Chloe stood there, pulse pounding in her ears. Adequate, he muttered. Not good. Not excellent. Adequate. She moved like clockwork. Refilling his glass before he asked. swapping napkins the second they showed the slightest crease, shielding him from Rick's hovering presence. She delivered service fit for royalty. As he finished his espresso, she allowed herself a small spark of hope. The bill, $185.50. A man dressed like that, treated like that, he'd tip 25%. Maybe more. Nearly $50. Almost exactly what she needed. Preston Sterling, though she didn't yet know his name, opened a sleek black leather wallet and placed a black American Express card on the table. Run it. No eye contact. She processed it quickly, hand steady. Returned with the receipt tucked neatly inside the leather booklet. Thank you for dining with us, sir. He signed with a heavy gold fountain pen, the ink flowing in an elaborate flourish. Then he reached back into his wallet. Chloe's heart began to race. Here it is. He pulled out a single bill. Not crisp. Not new. Wrinkled. Folded. Slightly dirty. He placed the $1 bill on top of the signed receipt. Then, for the first time all evening, he looked directly at her. A thin, cruel smile touched his lips. For the effort. He stood, buttoned his cashmere coat, and walked out into the Chicago night without another word. The door closed behind him. Chloe didn't move. The sounds of the restaurant dulled into a distant hum. She looked down at the receipt. The tip line? Slashed through. Empty. And sitting there, mocking her, was that crumpled dollar. It wasn't about the money. It was the message. You are worth nothing. Rick passed by, glancing at the table. Rough luck, Bennett. Looks like you charmed the wrong guy. Table 6 is waiting. Her eyes burned. Hot tears pressed against her composure. That dollar meant she was still short. It meant asking the pharmacist for more time. It meant explaining to Lily why things were tight again. It meant failure. But then something inside her shifted. The tears sto. Ped threatening to fall. The humiliation cooled. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was clarity. She turned toward the window and saw the old man through the glass, walking toward a waiting car under the streetlight's glow. And for the first time that night, she wasn't thinking about the dollar. She was thinking about what it represented. And she made a decision. The wind was howling so hard it sounded like the night itself was angry. And through the street restaurant window, Chloe watched a man who owned half the city struggle just to open his own car door. In that moment, he didn't look powerful. He looked small. She glanced down at the crumpled $1 bill still in her hand. Then she made a decision that would change everything. Chloe didn't slide the bill into her apron. She didn't sigh and let it go. She grabbed her coat and rushed out the back door. The parking lot was brutal. The wind sliced through her thin work shirt, whipping her hair across her face, stealing her breath. Gravel skittered across the asphalt. Her shoes slipped as she hurried toward the sleek, vintage Jaguar idling near the curb. Inside, Preston Sterling sat rigid behind the wheel. The engine hummed low and steady. The heater blasted warm air inside the cabin, fogging the edges of the glass. But he hadn't driven away. His gloved hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles tense. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked. Chloe tapped on the window. He flinched. Preston turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. He cracked the window open just 2 inches. I didn't forget anything, he snapped coldly. And I don't give handouts to beggars who chase me into parking lots. The words hit hard. But Chloe didn't throw the bill back at him. She didn't yell. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself as the cold bit through her coat. Sir, she said, her voice trembling, but steady. I think you dropped this. She held out the crumpled dollar. Preston stared at it. Then at her. Confusion flickered across his face. I gave you that, he said slowly. It's your tip. I know. Chloe slipped her hand into her apron pocket. Her fingers brushed against the small stack of bills she'd earned that night, mostly ones and a few fives. Maybe $30 total. Rent money. Grocery money. Medicine money. She pulled out a $5 bill. Then she wrapped her 5 around his one. "But I can't keep it," she said softly. The wind howled between them. "Because if a man wearing a coat that costs more than my car and driving a car worth more than my entire life feels the need to leave $1 for a waitress who worked for him for an hour, then you must be in more trouble than I am." The air seemed to freeze. Preston's mouth parted slightly. The sharp calculation in his eyes flickered, and something else replaced it. Shock. "You must be emotionally bankrupt," Chloe continued, her voice gentle, not cruel. "And I know what it's like to be broke. So please, take this. Put it toward your next meal. Maybe it'll taste better if you pay for it with kindness." She slid the small roll of money through the window opening. It landed softly on the passenger seat. "Drive safe," she whispered. And then she turned. The walk back to the kitchen entrance felt longer. Colder. She wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders hunched against the wind. She had just lost $6 she absolutely couldn't afford to lose. But she had kept the one thing she could never afford to sell. Her dignity. Inside the Jaguar, Preston Sterling sat completely still. The heater roared, filling the cabin with warmth. But a chill crawled up his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. He stared at the bills resting on the leather seat. A waitress, a nobody, had just outclassed him. He picked up the money slowly. His hands that negotiated billion-dollar contracts without shaking, were trembling. He wasn't angry. He felt something he hadn't felt in over 20 years. Shame. He glanced at the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of her silhouette disappearing through the restaurant door. "Chloe," he murmured, recalling the name from her tag, the name he had read and memorized, though he had pretended not to care. Chloe Bennett. He shifted the car into gear. But he didn't drive toward his mansion in Lake Forest. Instead, he pulled out his phone. Edwards. A pause on the line. "Sir, it's 9 p.m. "I need a file," Preston said, eyes fixed on the glowing sign of the Velvet Oak. "Full background. Financials. Family. Debts. Medical history. Everything." "On whom, sir? A corporate rival?" "No." His gaze never left the door. "A waitress. Chloe Bennett." A beat of silence. "Yes, sir." "Do it quietly. I don't want her to know she's being watched." He exhaled slowly. "This isn't a background check. It's an audition." The next 3 weeks at the Velvet Oak felt different. Chloe managed to negotiate a payment plan for Lily's medicine, but the stress clung to her like a second skin. Every shift felt heavier. Every dollar mattered more. Rick, the manager, grew sharper by the day. He cut her hours. Assigned her the worst sections. Blamed her for mistakes that weren't hers. But the strangest part wasn't Rick. It was Booth 4. 2 days after the parking lot incident, Preston returned. Same booth. Same rigid posture. He requested Chloe by name. He didn't apologize. He didn't mention the money. He ordered tea. And he sat there for 2 full hours, reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing up, not obviously, but enough. He left a standard 20% tip. Exact. Calculated. He came back 3 times a week. Always the same. Polite. Controlled. Distant. Never smiling. Never engaging in small talk. Just watching. He watched how she handled the rude couple at table 7 when they snapped about their order. He watched how she gently helped the elderly woman at table 2 count her change, patient and unhurried. He watched when Rick tried to blame her for a kitchen mistake, and how she stood her ground calmly, refusing to be steamrolled. He observed everything. Chloe felt it. He's creeping me out, she muttered to Jenna one night near the soda machine. He just stares. Like he's waiting for me to mess up. Maybe he's a secret admirer, Jenna teased. He's old enough to be my grandfather, Chloe sighed. And mean enough to be the Grinch. He's not admiring. She glanced toward booth 4. He's calculating. She had no idea how right she was. A month after the $1 tip, everything shifted again. The door to the Velvet Oak swung open one Tuesday evening, and the air in the room seemed to shrink. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, poised, draped in designer confidence. Oversized sunglasses remained on her face despite the indoor lighting. A Birkin bag hung effortlessly from her arm. She had Preston's sharp nose, but none of his composure. This was Victoria Sterling, his only daughter. She scanned the diner with open disgust, lips curling slightly. Preston followed behind her, looking tired. "This is the place?" Victoria asked loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. "Daddy, this is absurd. We have reservations at Learnad." "Sit down, Victoria," Preston said quietly. They took seats in Chloe's section. Chloe approached the table, her stomach tightening instantly. She knew that look. The kind that enjoyed testing people. Pushing them. Breaking them. "I'll have the Cobb salad," Victoria said, without opening the menu. "Dressing on the side. And if the lettuce isn't crisp, I'm sending it back. Bring me a glass of Pinot Grigio. The most expensive one you have. Though I doubt it's drinkable." Her tone dripped with disdain. "And for you, Mr. Sterling?" Chloe asked, turning to Preston. He looked up at her. And for the first time in weeks, his eyes held something different. What started as a simple lunch turned into something no one in that restaurant would ever forget. One insult too many. One sentence that crossed the line. And a billionaire who finally decided to speak. Chloe noticed at the moment they sat down, the way Preston Sterling looked at her. There was something different in his eyes that day. Not anger. Not impatience. Something sharper. Almost like he was measuring the room. "Just coffee, Chloe." "Thank you," he said quietly. The lunch itself had been a disaster from the start. Victoria sent the wine back once. Then again. She swirled it, sniffed it dramatically, and declared it unacceptable. The salad followed, she pushed it away with visible disgust. "It tastes like dishwater," she announced loudly enough for half the dining room to hear. Then came the finger snap. Sharp. Entitled. Humiliating. Chloe felt every snap like a flick against her skin, but she walked over anyway, steady, polite, professional. Through it all, Preston said nothing. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend. He simply watched. He watched his daughter belittle the staff. And he watched Chloe endure it with a composure that was almost painful to witness. Finally, it went too far. As Chloe cleared the plates, Victoria leaned back in her chair and smirked. "You really should do something about your hair," she sneered. "It looks like you cut it yourself. In the dark. It's unappetizing. No wonder you work in a dump like this." The restaurant fell silent. Forks paused midair. Conversation stopped. From the bar, Rick, the manager, watched with a smug little smile. He wasn't going to step in. Chloe gently set the plates down. Then she looked Victoria directly in the eye. "Mom," she said calmly, her voice dropping lower, steady, controlled, unshakable. "I cut my hair myself because I saved the salon money to buy medicine for my daughter." The silence deepened. "I work in this dump because I'm a mother who does what she has to do. I've served you with respect. I expect the same in return. If that's a problem, I'll have my manager assist you instead." Victoria gasped like she'd been slapped. She turned to her father. "Daddy, you hear that? She's insolent." Fire her. Buy this place and fire her. Preston Sterling slowly set his coffee cup onto its saucer. The soft clink echoed across the quiet dining room. He looked at his daughter. Then he looked at Chloe. She's right, Victoria. Victoria blinked. What? She's right, he repeated. You are being wretched. And she is showing more class in a stained apron than you are in a $5,000 dress. Victoria's face flushed crimson. Without another word, she grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. Preston didn't follow. For the first time that afternoon, he truly looked at Chloe. The coldness in his eyes was gone. What replaced it wasn't pity. It was exhaustion. I apologize for my daughter, he said quietly. She has never known the value of $1. Nor the value of a person. Chloe's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. It's okay, she said softly. No, Preston replied. It isn't. But you passed. Passed what? Instead of reaching for his wallet, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored business card. The paper looked expensive enough to frame. A phone number. And a single embossed emblem, a lion. My driver will be outside your home at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Preston said. Don't wear your uniform. Wear something for a boardroom. Chloe blinked. I don't understand. You will. He stood, looking more fragile than before. Rick, he called sharply. The manager practically jumped out of his skin. Yes, Mr. Sterling? The bill, Preston said calmly. And add a $5,000 tip. Rick's eyes widened. $5,000 for her? Preston pointed directly at Chloe. Not for the house. If I find out you've taken a single penny, I will have this building condemned by noon tomorrow. Do you understand? Rick went pale. Yes, sir. Preston turned back to Chloe. 10 a.m. Don't be late. We have work to do. At exactly 9:55 the next morning, a black Lincoln Town car rolled up to the curb of Chloe's worn-down apartment complex. Curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked through blinds. In that neighborhood, police sirens were common. Luxury town cars were not. Chloe stepped outside wearing her only suit, a charcoal gray set she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for a job interview. It pulled slightly at the shoulders, but she had ironed it meticulously until the seams were sharp and precise. She had left Lily with her neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, promising she'd be back by afternoon. The driver, a broad-shouldered man named Frank with a neck like a tree trunk, held the door open. Morning, Miss Bennett. Mr. Sterling hates tardiness. Good thing we made excellent time. The drive downtown was silent. Chloe watched the city blur past the tinted window, her stomach tightening with every mile. When the car stopped in front of Sterling Enterprises Tower, her breath caught. The building rose into the clouds, glass and steel gleaming in the morning sun like something carved for royalty. This wasn't a business. It was a kingdom. Frank escorted her through security. The guards nodded respectfully, as if she belonged there. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless. Long enough for doubt to creep in. What am I doing? She thought. I serve burgers. I don't belong in the sky. The doors opened with a soft chime. The reception area alone was larger than the entire restaurant where she worked. But it wasn't Preston waiting for her. It was a man who looked as though he'd been sculpted from granite. Tall. Impeccably dressed in a navy suit. Dark hair. Eyes that scanned her like a barcode. Miss Bennett, he said smoothly. I'm Harrison Sterling. CFO of Sterling Enterprises. Preston's son. So this was the brother. If Victoria was a firestorm, Harrison felt like ice. Nice to meet you, Chloe said, extending her hand. He steadied it briefly before shaking it. His grip was firm. Cold. My father is in the boardroom, Harrison said. But before we go in, let me save us some time. He stepped slightly closer, not enough to touch, just enough to intimidate. My father is eccentric. He's aging. He makes emotional decisions. His voice lowered. Whatever charity position he intends to offer you, whatever guilt-driven gesture he thinks redeems him, take the alternative. Chloe's heart pounded. What alternative? I'll write you a check for $50,000 right now, Harrison said evenly. You tell him you're not interested. You walk away. You return to your life, secure. $50,000. The number echoed in her head. Debt erased. Medicine covered. Breathing room. Harrison's expression didn't change. Everyone has a price, Miss Bennett. I've researched yours. Chloe slowly withdrew her hand. I'm not here for a handout, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I'm here for a meeting. Harrison gave a thin smile. It wasn't warm. 50,000, he repeated softly. And for a moment, the entire future seemed to hang on her next word. It was more money than Chloe had ever imagined seeing in one place. $50,000. Enough to wipe out every bill suffocating her. Enough to keep Lily's medication covered for 5 full years. Enough to finally breathe. For a split second, just a split second, her resolve trembled. Then she remembered the $1 tip. She remembered sliding it back across the diner table. She remembered the flicker in Preston Sterling's eyes when she refused to be pitied. This was no longer about money. This was about dignity. If your father sent for me, Chloe said evenly, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest, then I owe him the courtesy of listening. Excuse me. She stepped around Harrison. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by something colder. Sharper. Like a predator realizing the prey wasn't as defenseless as it looked. Chloe pushed open the double mahogany doors. The boardroom stretched before her like a cathedral of power. A polished table long enough to seat 30 dominated the room, though only 2 chairs were occupied. At the head sat Preston Sterling. Beside him was a thin, sharp-eyed man in wire-rimmed glasses, Nolan Graves, the company's general counsel. Preston looked worse than he had the day before. His skin carried a gray pallor, his breathing faintly labored, as if each inhale required negotiation. But when he saw Chloe, he straightened in his chair. You didn't take Harrison's money, Preston said. It wasn't a question, she replied, remaining on her feet. He offered you $50,000. Yes. Preston let out a dry, rasping chuckle. I taught that boy to be frugal. Not insulting. Sit down, Chloe. She sat. Nolan slid a thick folder across the glossy table. The sound of paper against what seemed unusually loud. Miss Bennett, Nolan began, his tone precise and professional, Mr. Sterling has been diagnosed with stage 4 congestive heart failure. His prognosis is limited. 6 months. Possibly a year. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Preston cut in quietly. I've lived long. Built an empire worth $3 billion. I've crushed competitors. Bought politicians. Reshaped the skyline of this city. His eyes drifted to the empty chairs around the massive table. But I failed at the only thing that mattered. The silence in the room thickened. I raised sharks, he continued. Harrison. Victoria. Brilliant. Ruthless. And hollow. His jaw tightened. If I die tomorrow, they'll strip this company for parts. Thousands of families depend on us for their livelihood. They won't care. They'll liquidate the Sterling Foundation to fund yachts and islands. He leaned forward, steel gray eyes locking onto hers. I can't change my will. The shares are locked in ironclad trusts. They inherit the money. He paused. But I can control the conscience. Chloe's pulse quickened. I've created a new position. It will be irrevocable for 5 years after my death. What position? She asked. Nolan adjusted his glasses and read from the folder. Director of Ethical Standards and Philanthropic Oversight. Chloe blinked. That sounds made up. It is, Preston admitted bluntly. But the authority attached to it is very real. He tapped the folder. You will have veto power over all Sterling Foundation grants, $100 million annually. And you will hold a board seat with full voting rights on any merger or acquisition affecting employee welfare. Chloe let out a nervous laugh. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, I'm a waitress. I don't understand merger contracts. I barely passed algebra. Preston slammed his hand on the table. The sharp crack made her jump. I have a building full of MBAs, he barked. Armies of lawyers like Nolan. I don't need another spreadsheet genius. He leaned forward, voice fierce. I need a human being. The words hung in the air. I need someone who knows what it's like to choose between heating and eating. Someone who returned $1 because her dignity mattered more. A violent coughing fit seized him, rattling his chest. Nolan quickly handed him water. Aft. A moment, Preston steadied himself. When he spoke again, his voice was almost a whisper. I need you to be the moral compass this family lost 20 years ago. He swallowed. Salary, $250,000 a year. Full benefits. A driver. Then his gaze sharpened. But you'll have to survive the sharks. They'll try to humiliate you. Break you. Destroy you. He held her stare. Will you do it? Chloe looked down at the contract. Then at the old man who wasn't afraid of dying, only of leaving behind a legacy of greed. She thought of Lily. She thought of the $50,000. Slowly, she picked up the heavy gold pen, the same one he had used to sign that diner receipt. I won't let you down, she said. And she signed. The moment the pen left the paper, the doors burst open. Victoria Sterling stormed in, Harrison close behind. You can't do this. Victoria shouted. Daddy, this is insanity. She's a servant. She serves steak. She's hired, Preston said calmly. And she outranks you in the foundation, Victoria. So I suggest you be polite. He didn't blink. She signs your expense reports now. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria turned slowly toward Chloe, her expression pure, unfiltered hatred. You will regret this, she hissed. I will make you wish you were back scrubbing tables. Chloe rose, smoothing her inexpensive suit jacket. I never scrub tables, she replied evenly. I serve people. Something you might want to learn. And just like that, the war began. The first week was brutal. Chloe's office was placed on the 38th floor, 2 floors below the executive suite. Close enough to see power. Far enough to remind her she didn't belong. The office itself was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City skyline glowing beneath her. But it was isolated. When she entered the break room, conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes avoided hers. Harrison had clearly made his position known. The waitress was the enemy. So she stood. IED. Relentlessly. Preston assigned Nolan to tutor her. She learned about fiduciary duty, corporate structures, grant compliance, regulatory law. She read late into the night, absorbing information the way she once memorized 20 table dinner rushes. But by day 4, the sabotage began. Her computer glitched constantly. Her login credentials malfunctioned. Her first paycheck was mysteriously delayed due to clerical error. Petty. Childish. Calculated. Then came Tuesday. A thick file landed on her desk, stamped in red, urgent. The Sterling Urban Renewal Project. 10 minutes later, Harrison walked in without knocking. He leaned against the doorframe, glancing at his Rolex. Father wants your sign-off, he said casually. Standard grant. $2 million to the city. Clearing an old condemned warehouse district on the south side. They'll build an eco-park. Green energy. Great press. He smiled faintly. Everyone wins. And he waited for her to sign. $2 million. 30 homeless families. One signature. And at 4:55 p.m., Chloe was 5 minutes away from signing away something she once depended on to survive. Just sign at the bottom. The glossy proposal lay open on her desk, lush photos of sunlit trees, children laughing on swings, rows of gleaming solar panels. It looked flawless. Clean. Hopeful. Exactly the kind of project the Sterling Foundation was supposed to champion. Why is it urgent? Chloe asked quietly. Harrison barely looked up. City Council votes tonight. We need the pledge in by 5. It's 3 now. He tapped the page with 2 sharp fingers. Don't overthink it. It's a park. Who hates parks? Chloe picked up her pen. But something tugged at her. A single line buried in the proposal. Condemned warehouse district. Where exactly? She asked. West 47th and Holstead, Harrison replied, already bored. The pen stopped midair. She knew that intersection. I need an hour. You have 10 minutes, Harrison snapped. The courier's waiting. Chloe. He slowly looked up at him. I said an hour. Or I don't sign. His jaw tightened. A flash of calculation crossed his face. And if you don't sign, the foundation money doesn't move, right? Silence. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Fine. 1 hour. But if we lose this deal, the bad press is on you. He stormed out. Chloe didn't call Frank, the driver. She didn't want Sterling eyes tracking her movements. Instead, she grabbed her coat, ran down the stairs, and sprinted 2 blocks before flagging a taxi. 47th and Holstead, she said, breathless. As the cab weaved through traffic, her mind replayed a memory she had buried for 4 years. When she arrived, she didn't see an abandoned wasteland. She saw St. Jude's Outreach Center. Yes, the building was old brick. Weathered. Industrial. But it wasn't empty. A line of people stretched down the sidewalk, waiting patiently for a warm meal. Through the open doors, she could see folding tables, children coloring on paper plates, volunteers moving quickly between rows. For years ago, she and Lily had spent 3 nights inside those walls, after fleeing an abusive ex-boyfriend and before she could afford her first apartment. It wasn't condemned. It had saved her. Chloe walked inside. The smell of soup and bread filled the air. Chloe, a familiar voice called. Father Mike stood near the serving station. Older now. More gray at his temples. But the same steady, kind eyes. My goodness, he said, squinting. You look corporate. She almost laughed. Father Mike, is this building being sold? Sold? He looked genuinely confused. Heavens no. We own the deed. Well, the holding company does. We pay rent to Apex Holdings. They've always been good to us. Apex Holdings, she repeated slowly. Outside, she pulled out her phone and called Nolan. Nolan, who owns Apex Holdings? I'm not sure. Give me a second. Keyboard clicking. It's a shell company registered in Delaware. Dig deeper. I'm holding. 5 minutes passed. Each one felt like a countdown. When Nolan came back on the line, his voice was tight. It's layered. Subsidiary of a subsidiary. But the primary beneficiary is Harrison Sterling. The pieces snapped into place. Harrison owned the building. He was planning to use the foundation's money, his father's charitable funds, to purchase the land from himself. $2 million would land in his own pocket. The shelter would be evicted. And he'd still claim a tax deduction for donating to build a public park. It wasn't philanthropy. It was a raid. Chloe stepped back inside and took a photo of the room, families eating warm meals, volunteers smiling. She took a selfie with Father Mike. Evidence. At 4:55 p.m., she walked back into the office. Harrison was waiting in her doorway, tapping his foot. Victoria stood beside him, smiling like a shark circling blood. "Time's up, Cinderella," Victoria said sweetly. "Figure out how to spell your name on the signature line?" Chloe walked past them without responding. She sat down, opened the folder. Then she picked up the red rejected stamp she had never used before and slammed it down. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "What do you think you're doing?" Harrison shouted, his polished calm fracturing. "I went to Holstead," Chloe said evenly. "I visited St. Jude's." His face drained of color. "It's not an empty lot. It's a shelter. One you secretly own through Apex Holdings. You were going to use foundation money to pay yourself $2 million. 30 homeless people would be evicted." Victoria blinked, confused. "Harry, you own the lot?" "Shut up," he hissed. He leaned over Chloe's desk, both hands planted hard against the wood. "You have no proof. I have Nolan. I have deed records. And I have a meeting with your father in 10 minutes. His voice dropped into something colder. "You tell him, and I will bury you. Every unpaid parking ticket. Every mistake. I will make sure you never work in this city again. You are a waitress. You are nothing." Chloe stood. They were inches apart now. "I was a waitress," she said quietly. "Which means I know how to deal with rats. And I know when someone's trying to dine and dash." She picked up the file. "Get out of my office, Harrison. Before I call security." For the first time, he hesitated. The realization hit him like ice water. The waitress wasn't just a symbolic hire. She was dangerous. He straightened his tie, shot a furious look at Victoria, and walked out. Victoria lingered a moment. Her expression was unreadable. Loathing and something else. "He won't forget this," she warned. "I hope not," Chloe replied. She won the first battle. But in the elevator, as it rose toward the penthouse, her hands began to shake. The adrenaline drained, leaving behind cold fear. She pressed her back against the metal wall, gasping for air. She had made a powerful enemy. And Harrison Sterling did not lose quietly. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Foundation annual gala loomed. Held in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel, it was the kind of event that graced the society pages of the Chicago Tribune before the first appetizer was even served. Gold leaf ceilings. Crystal chandeliers dripping light. Generations of old money echoing off marble floors. For Chloe, it felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a steak necklace. It had been 2 weeks since she killed the warehouse deal. And Harrison had said nothing. No threats. No retaliation. Just a polished, terrifying silence. Preston was in the hospital for routine observation, which meant tonight Chloe stood alone. She was the face of the foundation now. And as the doors to the ballroom opened, every camera flash felt like the calm before a storm. "You look like you're heading to a funeral, Miss Bennett," the driver murmured as he stepped out and opened the rear door of the sleek black town car. Chloe gave a tight smile. "It feels like it's mine." She smoothed the navy silk over her hips, a rented go. WN, modest and elegant, and more expensive for one night than her entire monthly grocery budget. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, too smooth, too fine, like it belonged to someone else's life. "Keep your chin up," the driver added gently. "You're the only person in that room who actually worked for their dinner." She swallowed hard and stepped out onto the red carpet. Cameras exploded in white flashes. The light was blinding. Disorienting. She could barely see past the glare, but she could hear them. "That's the waitress. The one Preston picked? Is it true she doesn't even have a degree?" Every whisper felt like a pin pressed into her spine. Inside, the ballroom was suffocatingly warm. The scent of perfume, champagne, and money hung heavy in the air. Waiters, her people, moved silently through the crowd with silver trays balanced perfectly in their palms. They kept their eyes down. Chloe didn't. She made a point to thank each one by name when they passed her. She held eye contact. She saw the flicker of confusion on their faces, and something else. Respect. Chloe, darling. The voice cut through the room like glass scraping across marble. Victoria Sterling glided toward her, draped in a dress that shimmered like liquid diamonds under the chandeliers. Her smile was wide. Too wide. Predatory. I didn't think you'd show, Victoria cooed, air-kissing beside Chloe's cheek. Brave. I work here, Chloe replied evenly, clutching her small, battered black clutch, the only thing she truly owned in that room. I don't hide. Of course not. Victoria's tone was syrupy sweet. Actually, Harrison and I were talking. We were harsh about the warehouse situation. You were right. It was a conflict of interest. We'd like to bury the hatchet. Chloe narrowed her eyes. Is that so? Victoria snapped her fingers. A server appeared instantly, holding a silver tray. Resting on it was a small, exquisitely wrapped box. A peace offering, Victoria said softly. Go on. Open it. Every instinct screamed at Chloe not to. But dozens of donors were watching now, pretending not to stare. She carefully unwrapped the box. Inside lay a breathtaking vintage beaded evening bag, Art Deco, intricate, heavy in her hands. The craftsmanship alone screamed wealth. My grandmother's, Victoria said, her voice suddenly misty. She was strong. Like you. Use it tonight. That old thing you're carrying, her gaze flicked to Chloe's worn clutch. It doesn't match the gown. It was a trap. Chloe felt it in her bones. But refusing a family heirloom in front of 50 wealthy donors would paint her as petty. Ungrateful. Thank you, she said stiffly. She transferred her phone, lipstick, and key card into the beaded bag. Then she handed her old clutch to coat check. As Victoria leaned in, her whisper was almost intimate. Enjoy the evening. Her eyes glinted. The night unfolded almost, too perfectly. Chloe delivered her speech without notes. She didn't speak about poverty like a statistic on a slideshow. She spoke about it like she had lived it, because she had. She described a mother choosing between asthma medication and rent. The humiliation of asking for help. The silence of eviction notices. The ballroom went still. Some faces softened. Others tightened with discomfort. Polite applause followed, restrained but undeniable. Then, at exactly 10 p.m., the main event began. The auction. At the center of the room, displayed in a glass case beneath focused lighting, was the Star of the North, a 10-carat loose diamond donated by a foreign dignitary. Estimated value, $1.2 million. The gem caught the light like frozen lightning. Harrison Sterling took the stage, handsome and charming as ever. And now, he announced smoothly, for the moment we've all been waiting for, the Star of the North. He gestured grandly toward the glass case. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The case was empty. For a second, no one moved. Then confusion spread like a virus. Harrison's smile evaporated. Security? Is this some kind of joke? The ballroom doors slammed shut with a thunderous boom. Uniformed officers marched in. Conversations dissolved into frantic whispers. A hotel security chief rushed to the stage and whispered urgently into Harrison's ear. Harrison returned to the microphone, voice grave. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. It appears the diamond has been removed from the case within the last 10 minutes. No one will leave until it's located. Panic ignited instantly. Pearls were clutched. Accusations muttered. A police captain stepped forward. We will be conducting a search. Please place all bags and coats on the tables. Chloe felt cold dread pour through her veins. Her gaze dropped to the beaded bag. It felt heavier than before. No. It was too obvious. They wouldn't. The officers moved methodically down the line. Victoria's bag? Empty. Harrison's pockets? Clean. Then they reached Chloe. Ma'am, the bag. Her hands trembled as she opened the vintage clasp. A flashlight beam sliced into the darkness inside. The officer reached past her phone, her lipstick, and pulled out a small black velvet pouch. One she had never seen before. The room fell silent. He opened it and poured the contents into his gloved palm. The Star of the North exploded with brilliance under the chandelier lights. Well, Harrison said softly, stepping forward. His voice carried perfectly. I suppose you can take the girl out of the diner, but you can't take the desperation out of the girl. I didn't take that. Chloe's voice cracked, raw and unpolished in the pristine ballroom. She gave me the bag. Victoria gave it to me an hour ago. Victoria gasped dramatically, clutching her chest. I did no such thing. That's my grandmother's bag. I haven't seen it in years. I thought it was lost. You must have stolen it. From my dressing room. Liar, Chloe stepped forward. An officer grabbed her arm. Chloe Bennett, he said firmly, pulling her wrists behind her back. You are under arrest for grand larceny. Handcuffs snapped shut. Camera flashes erupted like lightning storms. She could already see the headlines forming in her mind. Greedy waitress. Charity fraud. Preston's biggest mistake. As she was marched out past the judging stares of Chicago's wealthiest, she glanced back. Harrison and Victoria stood side by side. No smiles. Just cold, satisfied stillness, like executioners who had completed their task. The holding cell at the 1st District Station smelled of bleach and old sweat. Chloe sat on a narrow metal bench, still wearing the navy gown. It was wrinkled now. Smudged where she'd been fingerprinted. Her mascara had dried stiff on her cheeks. She had used her one phone call on Nolan, the company lawyer. No answer. The digital clock above the booking desk blinked 3 a.m. Bennett, the guard grunted from the bars. Your bail's been posted. Chloe blinked slowly, exhausted. What? Her voice barely worked. Who? It had to be someone powerful. Someone with money. Real money. The kind of money that doesn't just hire lawyers, it buys outcomes. You're free to go, the officer had said flatly. Trial date is set for next month. Just like that. Chloe stepped out into the cold marble lobby of the Chicago courthouse, her heels echoing against the floor. She braced herself for flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions, strangers whispering her name. But there was no crowd. No chaos. Just one man. He sat alone on a flimsy plastic chair, legs crossed, reading a folded racing form like he had all the time in the world. Rumpled brown trench coat. Scuffed shoes. The kind of face that looked permanently unimpressed. He stood as she approached. Edwards, he grunted. Private investigator. I work for Preston. I know who you are, Chloe replied quietly, hugging her arms around herself. Did Preston send you? Edwards didn't soften his tone. Preston's in a medically induced coma. Another heart episode. He saw the news in his hospital room. The words hit her harder than the arrest had. He's alive, Edwards said. Barely. Before they sedated him, he whispered one thing to me. He paused. Fix it. Chloe felt the air leave her lungs. Edwards looked her over slowly. You look like hell, kid. I didn't do it, she said, her voice cracking. Victoria gave me the bag. She must have planted the diamond in the lining before she handed it to me. I know you didn't, Edwards replied, already walking toward his beat-up sedan. Preston doesn't hire thieves. And thieves don't return lost dollar bills to customers. She managed the faintest breath of relief. But knowing it and proving it, he added. Two different things. The Sterling kids are smart. This was planned. They slid into the car. Chloe stared straight ahead, fighting the sting behind her eyes. They have the diamond in my bag. Witnesses say I was near the stage. Harrison controls hotel security. Yeah, Edward said, turning the ignition. They have hotel security. He glanced at her. But they forgot one thing. What? You're a waitress. She blinked at him, confused. What does that have to do with anything? You once told me you memorize entire tables without writing anything down, he said. You notice everything. Who drinks what? Who's left-handed? Who's flirting? Who's lying? He leaned back slightly. Go back to that night. Before Victoria gave you the bag. Who had it before her? Chloe closed her eyes. The gallery played in fragments, chandeliers blazing overhead, music swelling, champagne glasses clinking, laughter sharp and artificial. Victoria approached me at 8:45, she murmured. She handed me the bag. I switched my things. Go further back. She searched her memory harder. A server, she said slowly. A waiter brought it to her. On a silver tray. Edward. S turned toward her. Did you recognize him? Chloe swallowed. She knew most of the high-end service circuit in Chicago. But this one. He was young. Nervous. Had a scar on his chin. She opened her eyes. And he was wearing a gold Rolex. Blue face. A submariner. I noticed because he almost dropped the tray. Edwards raised an eyebrow. A waiter wearing a Rolex on banquet wages? Chloe nodded. That's our guy, Edwards said. Paid plant. If we find him, we find who paid him to stash the diamond before handing it to Victoria. She exhaled shakily. How do we find one random waiter in a city of 3 million? Edwards grinned, revealing nicotine-stained teeth. We don't. You do. He reminded her of something she'd once told him, that the service industry in Chicago was its own ecosystem. Bartenders, servers, bussers. Everyone knew everyone. Someone would know a young guy with a scar and a suspicious Rolex. And just like that, the fear inside her shifted. The despair melted into something familiar. Adrenaline. Take me to the Velvet Oak, she said. It was 4:30 a.m. when they pounded on the diner's back door. Rick opened it, bleary-eyed and pale. Chloe. Jesus. I saw the news. They're saying you stole the Hope Diamond or something. It's called the Star of the North, she snapped, brushing past him. And I didn't steal it. She turned sharply. Rick. I need the black book. He froze. Chloe, that's... I am facing 20 years in prison, she said, her voice steady but deadly serious. Give me the damn book. The black book wasn't an actual book anymore. It was a private Discord server, a hidden digital lifeline shared across Chicago's hospitality world. A place to warn each other about predators, bad bosses, scam artists. And to gossip. Chloe logged into the manager's office computer. Her fingers hovered for just a second before she typed. Mail server. Palmer House Gala tonight. Early 20s. Chin scar. Blueface Rolex. $1,000 reward for a name. She hit send. Now we what? It, she said. 10 minutes passed. 20. Edwards paced the kitchen, chewing on a stale muffin like it had personally offended him. Then. Ping. A message from user Martini Mike. That's Leo Rossi. Catering gigs. Always bragging about side hustles. Flashing a new watch yesterday. Said he hit a jackpot. Another ping. Lives in Pilsen. Hangs around the drum shop. Chloe slowly looked up. Leo Rossi. Edward slid his hand inside his trench coat, pulling out a handgun from a shoulder holster. He checked the safety with calm precision. Let's go have a chat. They found Leo Rossi at 6 a.m., stepping out of his apartment building. Duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Moving fast. Like someone who had somewhere to be. Edward stepped directly into his path, blocking the sidewalk with his heavy frame. Going somewhere, Leo? Move, Leo snapped. Get out of my way, old man. The next second happened fast. Edwards grabbed Leo's wrist, the one wearing the Rolex, twisted it sharply behind his back, and slammed him into the brick wall. Leo yelped. Nice watch, Edwards growled into his ear. Did Harrison Sterling buy it? Or was it Victoria? I don't know what you're talking about. Leo shouted. Chloe stepped out of the car. She walked toward him slowly. Not angry. Not screaming. Just disappointed. Leo, she said softly. I'm the woman you framed. I'm the one going to prison because you wanted a watch. Leo looked at her. Then away. He wasn't hardened. He was young. Greedy. Stupid. They told me it was a prank, he stammered. Victoria said it was a joke on her dad's new girlfriend. She said security was in on it. She said you'd just get embarrassed, not arrested. Edwards tightened his grip. You planted the diamond in the bag before bringing it to her? Leo swallowed hard. Yes. The truth finally out in the cold morning air. And for the first time since the arrest. Chloe felt hope. In the kitchen, Leo stammered, his voice shaking. She gave me the diamond wrapped in AN. Apkin. I slipped it into the lining, then brought it out later. That's it. I swear. Chloe's jaw tightened. We need proof, she said, steady but pale. Did she text you? Email you? Leo shook his head. No. She's not careless. Cash only. Face to face. Chloe felt the weight of it settle in her chest. His word against Sterling's. That wouldn't survive 5 minutes in court. Wait, Leo gasped suddenly, wincing as Edwards twisted his arm higher behind his back. She didn't text me, but I recorded the meeting. Everything stopped. Chloe and Edwards exchanged a sharp look. You what? I recorded it, Leo said, breathing hard. For insurance. In case they didn't pay the second half. My phone was in my pocket. Audio was running when we met in the service alley. The early morning air felt thinner. Edwards slowly released him. Give me the phone. And if that recording is clear, you might avoid an obstruction of justice charge. Leo fumbled with trembling fingers and pulled out a cracked iPhone. The screen flickered as Edwards pressed play. Static filled the space at first. Then, a voice sliced through. High. Sharp. Arrogant. Unmistakable. Victoria, put the stone in the velvet pouch inside the beaded bag. Bring it to me at 9 p.m. Make sure the waitress sees you. And keep your mouth shut, or I'll have you deported to a country you've never even been to. Here's 5,000. 5 more when she's in cuffs. Silence. Chloe didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it left her in a long, shaking exhale. 12 hours of fear drained from her lungs in one release. We got her, Edwards said quietly, a grim satisfaction settling over his features. But then his expression shifted. We don't take this to the police. Not yet. Chloe blinked. Why not? Because if we do, Harrison buries it in legal warfare. Years of delays. Technicalities. Settlements. The truth disappears in paperwork. He turned toward the horizon. The first streaks of sunrise lit up the Chicago SKYL. INE in pale gold. The city was waking up. We don't kill the beast in private, Edwards said. We do it in front of the village. The board meeting. This morning. Chloe's stomach tightened. The board meeting? Harrison called an emergency session. 9 a.m. Edwards checked his phone. Agenda item 1, removal of Chloe Bennett. Restructuring of the foundation. He's taking control today. Chloe looked at her reflection in the tinted car window. Smudged mascara. Wrinkled gown. Exhaustion etched into her face. She looked defeated. I need a shower, she said quietly. And my suit. You have 2 hours, Edwards replied. Get ready. We're crashing a party. The conference room on the 50th floor felt less like an office and more like a predator's den. Mahogany table. Floor-to-ceiling windows. 12 uneasy board members seated in tense silence. At the head stood Harrison Sterling, confident, polished, already tasting victory. My father's illness clouded his judgment, Harrison declared, checking his watch. Miss Bennett is a thief. I move to terminate her contract and transfer full control to the family trust. Murmurs. Shifting papers. All in favor? Hands began to rise. Then. Bang. The double doors burst open. Chloe Bennett stepped inside. Not in last night's stained gown. Not broken. Not small. She wore a charcoal suit tailored like armor. Every line sharp. Every step deliberate. Behind her stood Edwards. And Nolan, the company lawyer. I apologize for the interruption, Chloe said evenly. But I believe the bylaws require a hearing. Security. Harrison roared. Remove this criminal. Sit down, Harrison, Nolan cut in calmly. Or I'll play Leo Rossi's deposition. Right now. Harrison froze. Beside him, Victoria's face drained of color. Chloe walked forward and placed her phone gently on the polished wood. The room felt electrically charged. You called me a waitress like it was an insult, Chloe said, eyes fixed on Victoria. But waitresses notice details. Like the waiter you paid to frame me. She pressed play. Static. Then the voice. Clearer now. Colder. Put the stone in the bag. Here's 5,000. 5 more when she's in cuffs. Gasps rippled around the table. Victoria slumped back, panic swelling in her eyes. It's fake. Harrison shouted, slamming his palm against the table. A deep fake. I own 51% of this company. You can't touch us. Then. A rasping voice echoed from the doorway. Actually, he can. Every head turned. A nurse slowly wheeled Preston Sterling into the room. He looked fragile. Oxygen tube resting beneath his nose. Hands thin, veins visible. But his eyes burned. Father, Harrison whispered, shrinking where he stood. I woke up, Preston said hoarsely. And when I realized I had raised thieves instead of leaders. He turned toward the board. I am invoking the moral turpitude clause of the trust. Harrison and Victoria Sterling are stripped of all voting rights and beneficiary status. Effective immediately. The room seemed to collapse inward. You can't do this. Victoria screamed. I just did. Security moved, not toward Chloe, but toward the Sterling siblings. As Harrison was pulled away, still shouting threats, Preston extended a trembling hand toward Chloe. I tested her with $1, he said softly. She gave it back. You tested her with fire. She survived. He squeezed her hand. Effective immediately. Chloe Bennett is CEO of the Sterling Foundation. Preston Sterling passed away 3 days later. But his final decision changed everything. 6 months on, Chloe sat in the penthouse office that once felt untouchable. Sunlight streamed across her desk as she signed a grant approving funds for a new homeless shelter, the same shelter Harrison had tried to cut. Behind her hung no degrees. No awards. Just a simple black frame. Inside it, a crumpled $1 bill, folded neatly inside a 5. A quiet reminder. Dignity is the only currency that never devalues. Chloe touched the glass, smiled faintly, and returned to her work. She had people to serve. She hadn't just survived the test. She rewrote the rules. In a world obsessed with net worth, she proved that self-worth is the only currency that truly matters. Harrison and Victoria had billions. But they were bankrupt where it counted. Chloe had nothing but $1 and her integrity. And with that, she built a legacy. Now I want to ask you something. If you were standing in that parking lot, cold, humiliated, handed a $1 tip by a billionaire who thought you were beneath them, would you have kept it? Or would you have done what Chloe did? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps us share powerful stories like this with more people. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Until next time, be careful who you look down on.